Well, good evening and a really warm welcome. My name's James. I'm one of the ministers at Holy Trinity. We're thinking this evening about community, in particular, why we both need and fear community. I was on the sad news of Captain Sir Tom Moore's death today. I was reading a bit more about his foundation. It's interesting to see that the foundation he set up, the first cause that foundation is looking to deal with is combating loneliness. For many of us, yet another lockdown, this third lockdown, has brought acute loneliness. We know what it is to need community, but we not only need community, there's a sense in which we do fear community as well, isn't there? Relationships are complex and difficult. Many of us will have experienced the pain of relationships going wrong. Maybe you've known that feeling of standing in a room of people all around you, and yet to still feel utterly alone in the room. We need community, but we fear it as well. So one of the questions we'll think about tonight is, where can we find real community, a place in which we're really known and loved? Let me say a little bit about the plan for the next hour and 15 minutes or so. In a few moments' time, I'm going to interview Ofuchi. She's one of the members of our church community at Holy Trinity. I'll then hand over to John, who's a pastor of a local church. He'll speak for a few minutes on this topic. And there'll be the chance after that to ask your questions live. So I'm going to hand over to Rob. Rob's working sort of behind the scenes for us, doing all the clever techie stuff. He's going to let you know a bit more about how you can ask your questions throughout the evening.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Rob, Ministry Assistant at the church, and hopefully I will show you how you can send in your questions for our panel this evening. We're using something called Slido, and you can find the website and the code in the description in the YouTube video, which is below the video. Now, hopefully, technology works. I can go to here. Hopefully, you will be seeing my screen, whereby I will be going to show you where to go to Slido. So if you load up your browser and you go to you can either type in the website or you can just search for Slido on whatever search engine you may have. I have Google here. And this is, you want Slido, audience interaction made easy. Just load now. And then you can enter the code here. So our code for this evening is 35862. Type into that search bar, and it will come up with our event, Known and Loved, Why We Need and Fear Real Community. And to start us off for this evening, we have got a starter question for you, because I wonder, what springs to mind when you think of community? And we have a little poll here, which you can send in your answers to. So we've got here a couple of options for you. Do you think of, when you think community, do you think of going to the pub with friends? I remember those days. Maybe even a bingo night or meal out with friends. Or perhaps you have other ideas of what community is for you. Well, if you do, brilliant. We're going to have another poll soon after this one where you can give us your ideas of what you think about when you think of community. You also see on my page that we have the Q&A here, where you can type in your questions for this evening that our panel will answer later on in our event tonight. And you also have the opportunity, if you see a question that someone else has posted, to vote for it so that it gets higher up in the category. And our panelists will hopefully try and get around to all of your questions tonight. However, if we sadly cannot, then please do contact our church, details of which can be found in the description below this video. Well, I shall stop the screen there and hand back over to James.
Rob, thank you very much. Let me just remind you of that code for Slido. It is 35862. So do pop that into the website, 35862. We'd love to see what springs to mind when you think of community. We're going to meet one of the members of our church community now. We've got Ofuchi here with us. Ofuchi, lovely to have you with us virtually. Thanks for joining. You moved a few months ago to Norwich. Your work as a doctor involves moving around quite a bit. Tell us where you've lived in the past few years, where does Norwich rank in the places you've lived over the last few years?
So I went to university in Hull. Then after that, lived in Burton-on-Trent for 2 years and went to church in Derby. Then I spent almost a year in Birmingham. And after that, I came to Norwich. So I was told to say that Derby is the best place out of everywhere that I've lived. But Norwich has been pretty good. I think I like the fact that the pace is generally a lot slower. I like the fact that you can go on walks as well nearby, and the beach is quite close as well. And seeing the seals was quite nice.
Great. That's quite a few moves in a short space of time. How do you find that? What's some of the things you find challenging? Maybe some of the things you enjoy about moving so regularly.
So I think the challenging aspect about moving regularly is, I guess, having to make a new social network each time. Between moving from Burton to Birmingham wasn't too bad, and at least I was close to home, and I could still drive there or see my friends in Derby. And also, it's having to, I guess, kind of open yourself up to a new set of people each time. I think at the beginning, when I first became a Christian and was going to church in Hull, I found that quite hard because I wasn't used to being in a community setting. But as the more times I moved, even though each time God kind of challenged me with that, it, in a sense, it became easier. But I think what made it easier is remembering how, I guess, God kind of moved each time. I moved how by encouraging me to open up to people that I've met, how he's kind of blessed and provided for me and for others. I guess the nice thing about moving is that you get to know parts of the UK, get to know different spots, make more friends, which is kind of nice.
Thank you. You talked there about sort of opening yourself up to a new group of people, and can you just say a bit more about how you've tried to be part of a community in the different places you've lived? Maybe particularly as you sort of, it might not be that long at any one place. I don't know if there's temptations to think, well, I'm only here for a while, I'll not invest in a community here. How have you tried to go about that in those different places you've lived to find community and invest in community?
So what has helped with each move is joining a church, and to kind of help become more involved, I would join the welcome team. So even though I don't, at the beginning, I wouldn't know majority of people in the church, but over time, by introducing yourself to people as they walk in through the door, you slowly start to get to know people, as well as joining home groups as well, and 20s and 30s group, or student group. I found that quite helpful. Yeah, especially because you get to meet people in a more social setting as well. So you're kind of more relaxed and it's easier to get to know people.
Thank you. I was saying at the start how our relationships are complex, which makes community something we know that we really need, but can fear as well. What's been your experience of finding real community in the churches you've been part of?
My experiences they've been quite good, in the sense that each church that I moved to, I was able to actually become embedded in the community. I guess despite the fact that it can be a bit nerve-wracking, I think mainly because people were open enough to actually get to know me, to introduce me to other members of the church, members of their family, inviting me to their home. So I think it's definitely the welcoming nature of the people in each church which have helped. Yeah, and I think that's kind of encouraged me with each move to try and keep in touch with a set of people from each church. Because with so many moves, it can be quite easy for people just to know bits of your life, but not that many people who kind of know you kind of like over the years or long term.
Thank you, Ofuchi. Thanks so much. And thank you as well for all you're doing as a doctor on the front line, the risks you're putting yourself in day in, day out. We sort of hear secondhand how things are at hospitals and at the NNN. But thank you so much. Just one last question. How are things at the hospital? Are you noticing a bit of improvement now, a few weeks into lockdown?
Yeah, I've noticed that. So like we have a color-coded system with regards to the wards. So red are wards where we have COVID patients. Yellow is that we're not too sure initially when they're admitted whether they have been exposed or not. And green is that they've been self-isolating before they came into hospital. And the number of red wards has been going down, which is quite good. And I guess quite reassuring that at least the COVID is getting better controlled. I think we're kind of still a little way off from like before I guess the peak of like this wave. But it's encouraging to see that it is getting better.
Great. Good news. Good to hear. Ofuchi, thanks so much for joining us. Lovely to have you with us. Do keep sending in your questions to Slido. Do keep putting in your answers to the poll. Let me tell you what springs to mind when we think of community. These results in the four choices you had, right at the top with 38% is going to the pub with mates. Obviously, really missing that. Bingo got no votes. No one looks to bingo for community. 25% said meal with close friends, and other was up at 38% as well. So I'll let you know when we hear some more thoughts on that. The second poll is now live, so if you answered other, you can just pop in there what springs to mind when you think of community. If it's not bingo, pub, or meal with close friends, other options are available. John, it's lovely to have you with us. Thanks for joining us virtually. I'm sorry we couldn't be physically as we first planned. Just tell us where's home. How long have you been in Norfolk, John?
Thank you, James. Yes, home is Frettenham, a little village quite close to Coltishall. We moved here 11 years ago, which is amazing. I love it here, and yeah, it's beautiful.
Great. And what's the day job for you?
So I, during the day, work as the minister of Broad Grace Church, which is a little church that meets in the village of Coltishall. If you've ever been there, there's a really nice tea room called A Piece of Cake, and we share that building with them, and we meet there on a Sunday, although at the minute we meet on Zoom.
Thanks. And John, what was your answer to that poll? What springs to mind when you think of community?
Well, James, I cheated because I answered the first one and the second one. So that's not very fair. But immediately going to the pub with friends kind of jumped out at me. I just thought, oh, yeah, it's ages. A quiet pub with a quiet corner and a few friends and a beer. And so I missed that. But then when the second one came up, I thought, actually, I really miss our church toddler group as well. I go along to kind of help set the toys up and clear up at the end and things, and I really enjoy that community and the opportunities we get to chat with the mums and the dads and the other carers who are there, and the children just running around and having fun. And I just think, yeah, that should have been tomorrow morning, and it won't be, and I really miss it.
Well, John's going to speak for about 15 minutes or so now. He's going to be one of the panel answering questions in a few minutes' time. So do send your questions in as he's speaking. Just a reminder of the code for that. It is 35. Let me make sure I get it correct. 35862. So do keep sending your questions in. John's going to speak for 15 minutes now, and then we'll have a time after that answering some of your questions. John, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, James. We're thinking about being known and loved and why we need and fear real community. And hopefully we'll have a chance to think a bit about that together now, and then to have some good discussion as a panel. So if you've got any questions that relate to community, that relate to God, pop them in the Slido, because it's great to have a good discussion. Otherwise, we'll all just witter on, I guess. I wonder what you've been watching over the last year during lockdown. Box sets are big, and I thought I'd better fess up. So I have been enjoying The Queen's Gambit, which I think is quite highbrow. I've also been enjoying Modern Family, which is not, and Picard, which is nerdy. That's part of the Star Trek group of series, in case you aren't aware of them. And it's the same thing I like about them. And I wonder if you can identify with this in the TV and the films you like. I like community. I love to see a motley crew drawn together as community, whether it's Picard's lot or whether it's Skywalker and Han Solo, or that bonding together in adversity. Modern Family is the family as community, the extended family who fall out and have rows but care for each other and are bound together. In The Queen's Gambit, well, the Soviets play as a team. It's about chess. And can Beth win alone? I won't spoil it in case you've not watched it. I would recommend it. We have an urge towards community. We are intrigued by and delighted by relationships. Friends was radically successful. The people who make the TV shows know that we like to see a group of people who are for each other no matter what. And we've seen that during these lockdowns. The isolation is terrible. I'm married, we've got 3 daughters, so I've not been in that situation myself, but I've got a lot of friends who are, and it is really, really hard when you're starved of community. Even if you get it online and on telephone calls, it's not the same. We have an urge towards community, but we also have an urge away from community. Lockdown community has been hard. I can probably speak more to that than the isolation. There's some times when I've envied those who've been locked down alone. It is hard to be thrown together. Relationships are complicated. Sometimes they are very hard. What is it in us that draws us to community and makes us fearful of community? Why do we have this strange, ambiguous attitude? I guess there's loads of ways we can answer that. It is an enormous topic. And if you're not satisfied with some of the ways I go about it, please do chuck in some questions and we'll get to them later. But I wanted to look at Jesus and how he invites one person in particular into community. Jesus is God's Son. He is the God who made us, who then entered into his own creation, being born as a human being like you or I. Jesus is God in the flesh, God who came to live with us, and God who came to live with us to invite us into community with him. And we're going to see what that looks like when he meets one particular woman. I'm going to be reading a bit from the Bible. It's the Gospel of John. John was a friend of Jesus. He wrote this account of Jesus' life. And in chapter 4 of his Gospel, he said that Jesus had to go through Samaria. He came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" The Samaritan woman looked at him and said, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Here is Jesus meeting this woman who's come to the well to draw water. Now, they're both alone. It's noon. It is the heat of the day. It's an odd time to be coming to draw water. And maybe that gives us a bit of a clue that this woman is wanting to be alone. She's come out of the village at a time when she knows that others will not. And Jesus is there resting by the well as his friends have gone off to buy some food. And Jesus, he asks her for a drink. And she's surprised because the Jewish people and the Samaritan people were enemies. Jesus is a Jewish man. She is a Samaritan woman. And she is amazed that he would make himself vulnerable, that he would ask something of her. That is a strange thing for him to do. He should ignore her. He should pretend like she's not there, like she is just dirt. That's how it goes. And that's surprising. And she asked Jesus, "Well, how can you ask me for a drink?" And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answers, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Jesus is making her an offer. So what is this water that he is offering her? This living water, this life-giving water. He hasn't said yet, but clearly it's something this woman wants. You can sense as they talk that she moves from surprise to humoring Jesus. He's offering me water, but he hasn't got a bucket and a rope. Maybe he's been a bit touched by the sun. To being intrigued, to wanting this water that Jesus offers. There's something about him, maybe his sincerity, maybe his manner, maybe his friendliness, that is drawing her in. And the reason that she's so easily drawn in is that she has an unquenchable thirst in her life. And Jesus knows it. And he's about to tell her that he knows it. He said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. This is where she's about to get a shock. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." Jesus knows her. He knows all about her. He knows why she is by herself at the well. Now, we don't know how much this woman is sinned against, how much she has been badly treated by these men, and we don't know how much she has sinned against them and treated them badly. But my guess is it's a mixture. It often is. What we can see, though, is her desperate need. She is desperately, deeply, fundamentally alone, come to the well by herself, craving love, maybe doing all she can to get it. And as a result, driving her community away from her and herself out of her community. Here is a woman whose life has revolved around relationships and yet meets God alone. It is heartbreaking. And it is us. We crave love. We are desperate for family. We devour relationships. Some of us suck it out of people, and we drive people away, and we are desperate, and we don't know what to do, and we don't know how to change. We feel lonely, and we feel like no one understands, and like no one gets us. We are like this woman at the well. We are desperate to be known and loved, but we are terrified to be known. We have done wicked things. Now, you probably don't know me. I seem like a fairly nice guy. I'm a minister of a church. It's quite easy to put on a good front. I sit in front of these books. They're all just a Zoom background. There are times when I have had a rough day and I am feeling annoyed and put on and tired. And I slightly wind up my children so that I've got an excuse to be angry with them when they're rude, because I want to take my frustration out on somebody. I want to be cross. And so I engineer, because I'm cleverer in that way than them, I engineer the situation so that I get to be cross and take their sweeties away or something. That's horrible. That is just nasty, isn't it? We do wicked things. We look good, but we are damaged goods. We are hurt, we are bruised, we are broken, we are used by others, and we are those who hurt and bruise and break and use others. And this is our problem with community, I think. This is our problem with relationships. We want to be known and we want to be loved, but how can we be loved if we are known? And so we do just what this woman did. We run. We hide. We evade. Jesus knows exactly who she is. He knows all about her. He has cut far too close to the bone. And so she does what always works with preachers. She throws him a theological question. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is Jerusalem. I think that'll get him going. The Jews love to debate where to worship. I'll say we're Samaritans, we worship on the mountain. You Jews, you worship in the city in Jerusalem. And that'll start off a theological debate, and he'll forget all the stuff about my husbands and not husbands and leave me alone. Problem is, you can't run away from God. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. I'm not interested in theological questions, he says. Now, you Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. Jesus is the promised Messiah. Jesus is the one this woman's scriptures have told her will come for centuries. Jesus is God on earth. He is the prophet of prophets. And now this woman has to choose. Her God, her creator, the origin of all that she is standing before her. And her soul and her life and her story is open to him. She is known. And yet he has offered her his love, his life, his living water. She has offered her himself. He has revealed himself to her. He has cut away her religion and her theology and her ideas and said, it comes down to me. I stand before you as your God, and I invite you to come. I know you, and I will love you if you will trust me. And she accepts. The disciples return, and she runs back into her town, and rather than avoiding community, she gathers everyone around and she tells them about Jesus. And as a result, many of them become his followers. That woman left her village alone. She left to go to the well to draw water. God had other plans for her that day. I don't know what brought you here tonight. Maybe your friend was just insistent and you thought it'd be rude to say no. Maybe you were intrigued. It's on YouTube. I can find out a bit about God without it being too awkward. God brought you here tonight. You are known. Now that might terrify you. The thought of having your camera on a Zoom call might be too much. You are known. And to be honest, that scares me. God saw what you did. He heard what you said. He looked at the page you clicked on. He knows what you thought. And here is the wonder. You are known and you are loved. He calls you to himself in forgiveness. He calls you to enter into a community where you are loved and known and forgiven and accepted and welcomed, where he will take you as you are and make you what you long to be. Jesus knows you and he loves you, and he invites you right now into the family he has known with God his Father, with the Holy Spirit for all eternity. There's a reason why the church is called Holy Trinity. Because God is community, God is family. He always has been, and he wants to welcome you in. Jesus knows you. Jesus loves you. Jesus invites you home to himself, and you can come. There is nothing to fear. Now, we have covered a huge amount of ground there and left a lot of questions unanswered and loose ends untied. So please do push back, disagree. I'm not going to mind. Pick up on any of the things that came up in the interview with Afuchi, with what James has said, with what I've said. We would love to help you as best we can. And if you've got more questions after this, then get in touch with the folk at Holy Trinity, and they would love to help you with that too.
John, thanks so much. Good number of questions coming in from people off the back of some of the things you said, and some other things as well. We've got a little panel that are going to answer your questions. Do keep sending them in. Just a reminder of the code. It's 35862. Do keep sending questions in. I'm going to just introduce our panel so we know everyone that's going to be answering questions. I'll hand over to Richard. Richard, I'll leave you to introduce yourself.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, James. And great to be with you this evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm the minister at Holy Trinity. So we've been here, my wife Karen and I, for 3.5 years or so. So a bit more time in Norwich than Offachi. But actually, I've got a teenage childhood when I was in and around Norwich myself. And so this is a community of which I was once part, and it's great to be back here again.
Thanks, Richard. You were in North London before. North London or Norwich, which ranks highest for you?
That's a very unfair question.
Okay.
They are equally difficult to to pass. I think they are both amazing places for different reasons. Loved London for the buzz, for the easy trips to the West End, for the Premiership football teams round the corner. But love Norwich, as Offerty was saying earlier. Fantastic city to wander around, great history, and having lovely beaches a short distance away as well.
Right. Very clever answer, Richard. Well done. And Margaret, thanks for joining us on the panel as well. I'll leave you to introduce yourself.
Hello, and it's great to be here and welcome you as well. I'm a member of the church family at Trinity. My background is in teaching, but I'm now retired. There must be something about Holy Trinity, I think, that draws you back, because I was a student at Holy Trinity, had very fond memories of it. And when I moved back to Norwich over 20 years ago now, Holy Trinity was the church that I found to be home.
Thanks, Margaret. We'll dive straight into the questions. Let me start with this question. Great question. In an increasingly secular and aggressive world, will the church community become more insular and fundamental, or open up to be more inclusive and liberal? Let me just say the question again, because it's quite a long one. In an increasingly secular and aggressive world, will the church community become more insular and fundamental, or open up to be more inclusive and liberal? Who wants to kick us off with some thoughts on that? Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, what a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that one. You can see the danger, can't you? Absolutely, that in a culture that's in some ways becoming more secular, I think that's debatable actually, but just assume it is. It's easy to assume the church will have to sort of retreat behind our barricades and, fight for our territory and defend the things we hold dear and all those kind of things. All that polarization actually that we've been seeing in European culture, British culture, North American culture. But actually what encourages me about the church is actually the presence of Jesus here. Because if you think about it, he lived in a very polarized culture, actually far more hostile environment when he was on earth, first century Palestine, than what we're in today. And he was experiencing the hostility of the Roman Empire, the brutal treatment of their subject people like the Jews. And then he experienced rejection even by some of his own Jewish people, those that fiercely resented his message of God's kingdom of peace and of love and of forgiveness and of inclusion of the whole world in the love of God. And so I think because the church at its heart, with all its faults, is built on that conviction, that life of Jesus, not just his example, but actually his living presence that generates that openness that the church so often does display. I'm actually very hopeful that we've got a confidence in which we stand, but also a confidence that takes us outwards and enables us to reach out to the world around us, saying, as it were, this is who we are. This is the God that we love and follow. We'd love you to tell us about your questions, your debates, your difficulties, but also love you to meet this same Jesus.
Thanks. Others do chip in. John, go on.
Yes, I think that's really, really helpful, Richard. Thank you. It's such a big question and such a challenge, I think, for churches and for Christians to not retreat into a sort of defensive stance where we see society around us as kind of against us, but to act like Christ did, like you said, in love and in grace. And I think it's a challenge to the church to think, are we about defending what we are and what we have? I think whatever's going on in society, that the church and Christians don't necessarily carry that automatic respect and sort of the ability to carry the moral high ground. I'm not sure we ever should have, in a sense, had that, but that's gone. And I think we need to think, well, are we going to try and to restore that? Are we going to try and make ourselves look great? or like Jesus, are we going to embrace being weak and being small and being those who, when we meet a Samaritan woman, don't look down on her because we are Jewish men and we're better, but who say, could you get me a drink because I've got no water? You know, are we happy to be weak and dependent and alongside others in our communities? And I quite welcome it, because I think, you know, actually the church, we need to shed that bit of us that thinks we've somehow got it all sorted or got some moral high ground, whereas actually Jesus is our God and we are weak, and he is our hope, like Richard said. So just to echo that really, Richard, and I think it's a massive issue. A great question.
Thanks. There's loads more that can be said around that question. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to discuss that further. Lots more that could be said. Let me move on to the next question. This has been liked by quite a few people. How do we reach out to people who are introverts and naturally find being in a group of people harder, like to be on their own, they don't think they need to belong anywhere? Interesting, just as an aside, as one of you thinks to answer that, there's a good friend of mine who's naturally an introvert, and he said this third lockdown has showed him that even as an introvert, he does need people. There's only so much time he can have on his own as someone who naturally recharges on his own. But it's a helpful question. How do we reach out to people who are introverts and think they don't need to belong anywhere? Margaret, do you want to kick off for that? Thanks.
Yeah, shall I give that a go? Because I think I'd probably define myself as an introvert, so perhaps I'm a good person to answer it. I think anyone, even if you are naturally introverted, wants to feel that people care about things that are happening in their lives. I think all of us actually respond to someone being interested in us. And we've looked at the story of the Samaritan woman and seen that Jesus was interested in her. And as Christians, we're called to model our lives on Jesus. I think the Bible tells us to be hospitable to people. And I think anyone responds to saying, you know, come round for a meal, have a glass of wine and a few nibbles. We all like someone just to take an interest in who we are. And as Christians, showing the love of Jesus, we should be doing that to other people, and praying that people will respond to that love.
Thank you. Richard or John, anything you want to add to that? Thanks, Margaret.
Not massively. Just to say, it's interesting. I think I've met more introverts than extroverts in churches. I think it seems to be that sense that we all want to be known and loved. You just need to give us introverts a little bit of space sometimes if you're an extrovert. Just putting that out there.
John, thanks. Let's keep moving on. Question that's been liked by a couple of people. Can church seem to be for only certain groups of people? For example, Anglican churches seem to be for middle class people only. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, again, yeah, great observation. Thank you for that question. I think it's easy to kind of get that impression, don't you, that churches are for only one kind of person. And I've certainly seen, churches, not just Anglican ones actually, that are pretty middle class. Sometimes it's just the area of a city that the church is based in. You'll tend to get, I think, a more mixed community if you are in a small town or a rural village or somewhere, because you'll have a more mixed community around you there, chances are. So to some extent, churches reflect the community around them. That's a good thing. I think, shouldn't we do that? I would also actually say, I'm an Anglican, so I've got to defend Anglicans here at this point, haven't I? Yes, definitely some are very middle class, but actually the Anglican Church has done a great job over the last 200 years at reaching some of the most deprived parts of our cities all over the country, and still is doing. I think it's a good question. I would answer to defend the church that, with all our faults, and I know we can become, monochrome and stuff, I still find churches the most diverse communities on this planet. And that's because I think of one thing, and that's the good news of Jesus. I've seen nothing else. I've seen clubs that unite people because they all like football, or they're all Star Wars fans. And certainly we polarize a lot around things like ethnicity and race, don't we? But actually, Jesus is the one person, the one thing that brings us all together, whatever our differences. So there's a depth there in what we share. It's not just we like the same films, but actually we've been brought together around the same God. There's also a breadth. And the church, I think, has a capacity to have a breadth that no other community on the planet has. And I've actually seen, in the churches we've been over the years, I've seen that in remarkable ways. People from very different backgrounds, people that didn't know God at all, people that grew up in other different denominations but came to faith in our church, people who were violent atheists before that came to Christ and now follow him, alongside people who've grown up and were baptized as babies and always in church, sang in the choir. Remarkable diversity. I've seen that nowhere else but in the church, with all our faults.
Thanks. John, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've seen the same, quite a lot of diversity. But one of the things I wonder is whether our selection and training for ministers is a bit too narrow and middle class. And that gives the impression, because a lot of the voices, I mean, listen to me, a lot of the voices you hear are sort of received English accents, that kind of thing, which is probably not as reflective of the churches that we're part of. So I think we do have a problem. But I'm hoping it's maybe a slightly easier problem to address than the one that we're only kind of welcoming to certain groups. But it's a good challenge to always hear, because it'd be such a denial of who God is if we only welcomed in some of his people, some of the people he's made. That would be crazy. Thank you.
Thanks, cool. Yeah, Margaret.
I think I'm probably doing a lot of self-revealing here, because I'm an introvert, but I was also actually brought up in a council estate and have spent a good part of my life in the Anglican Church. So perhaps I hope I'm not the exception that breaks the rule, because certainly as a child, I went to an Anglican church that did a lot of reaching out to the area around it. I've been involved since in a church, not an Anglican church, but was in the middle of a council estate, and spend a lot of time actually reaching out to the people on that estate. I think we are called to follow Jesus, and he spent his time with outcasts, with people who perhaps were not part of the religious establishment. And so, we do follow his example. I admit that the church can give the wrong impression, that sometimes it does appear to be for more middle class people, and perhaps we do need to look out and see where we're going wrong in some places. But I hope the recent lockdowns have shown that the church has a great heart for reaching out to those who are deprived, and to sharing with them, not just for their physical needs, but also really sharing that good news of Jesus with those around us.
Okay, thanks so much. Let me move on to a question. John, I wonder whether you might take a lead on this question, because it ties in with some of the things you were saying in your talk. Why do we need God to make community happen well? Perhaps people can think of all sorts of places where actually we've got a pretty decent community, it's going well enough. Why do I need to bring God into the equation?
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. I like it, and I want to agree in a sense with that. I think what might well be the thought behind it, that there is plenty of great community that doesn't have God involved in it. we see great community in families, we see great community in other faiths at times, we see great community in clubs and all sorts. So yes, I don't think you need some sort of Christian basis to have great community. I would say you need to be made in the image of a God who is relational. And I'd maybe want to reverse the question, say, why do we care so much about community? In lots of ways, there's to make the best of myself, we're told, look out for number one. There's how to make friends and influence people. People are there to be used on your road to the top, whatever that might mean. There's plenty of that sort of thinking out there of this sense of, well, why do we want community? Why do we need community? Why do we sacrifice ourselves for others and see that as a good and right and noble and beautiful thing? You watch the film where the mother sacrifices herself, her needs, whatever, for the children, and you go, yes, that is right. Or we love that. And I think it's because the God who made us is community. God is love. God has always been a family of three persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now there's depths in that, but fundamentally, God is relational, God is family, God is loving, and he's made us like him. So we seek and create good community. And I think to bring God into that community just makes it better. So I don't think he's necessary in that sense. Well, he's necessary in that he made us, I would believe. But I think to bring God into community, to God's help to forgive and to be open and to reveal yourself and to be known and to love others and to know them and to understand it helps. It is massively helpful. I am a better dad and a better husband and a better friend and a better son for knowing God. And I know that's the case because I was a lot nastier at those things before I was a Christian than I am having been saved, having been made one of God's people. He's got a lot of work to do. He's still doing it, but yeah, I'll stop there. Someone else might want to chip in.
John, no, thanks. That's really helpful. You mentioned right at the start of your talk about enjoying Queen's Gambit. We've been loving that too. We've just got to the end, so I'll try and avoid any spoilers. But there is a wonderful moment where the Russians are basically saying that the Americans play chess as individuals and they play as a team. And there's a moment when the Americans start playing as a team, and I just felt myself kind of cheering inside as that. Here they are, they're doing community. There's something deep inside that craves to see community happening. Margaret or Richard, anything either of you want to
add? Yeah, just echoing the last bit of what John was saying there, really helpful. What difference does it make having God in your communities or being part of a community in God? Jesus said some remarkable things about community, and I think however wonderful, I've been part of fantastic communities, sports teams and things, great relationships, great fun. But Jesus said some amazing things about community that no one else has said, and no one else has the power to help us to live out. So he said things like, love your enemies, forgive those that sin against you. The New Testament is full of these one another phrases: serve one another, bear with one another, forgive one another, carry one another's burdens. I've got one actually on the coincidentally behind me on the mantelpiece there. I've got something, a school I was part of in London, which had a Bible verse: serve one another in love. There's one of the one another's there. That's not just the challenge of community that Jesus calls us to, a depth of relationship. When we break down, when we're broken people, when we hurt other people, when we're hurt by others, there's that call to go on in community rather than just getting annoyed, walking off, not speaking to them ever again, blocking them on my mobile phone. The Christian call is to go much deeper than that and to forgive and to serve and to love through all of that. And I can't do that on my own, but because as a Christian, Christ is in me and I'm in Christ, I begin to have the capacity. And that's why I say the church communities I've been part of, I've seen a depth of love lived out that I've seen nowhere else.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah.
Sorry, problems with my microphone there. I think I really just want to echo what Richard has said. I mean, I'm part of a Keep Fit class, which we develop a sense of community around. We go out for meals together, we celebrate each other's birthdays, but actually I probably do that for what I get out of it for me. It keeps me physically fit, it gives me some company. Whereas when I look at the church and I look at what Jesus calls me to, I'm actually there to serve other people. I'm there because I want the best, or at least I'm called to want the best. I think none of us live up to what we're called to be. We are, as we were told earlier, forgiven sinners, and we obviously need Jesus to begin to transform us, but we are called to want the best for those around us, to look out for the needs of others rather than for ourselves.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm going to move us on to another question. We'll do perhaps another kind of 5 or so minutes of questions. We may not get through all of these, so sorry if we don't get to yours. Question about the kind of relevance of the church to wider society. How can we as a church demonstrate to those around us that the church is relevant to them? How can we as a church demonstrate that the church is relevant to them? John, thanks.
I think the way I'd start with that is, I think love, and that looks different in different contexts, but Jesus called us to love our neighbours as well as to love our God. And I think at the minute where it feels like people are rushed and people are maybe sometimes pigeonholed, people are struggling for relationship, I think having time to listen, to let people know that they are known is important. I just find, with my neighbours, with some of the teachers I get to meet, school governor, and just actually taking the time to listen, not with an agenda, but just to understand what's going on in someone's life and care and know them, is something that is at the heart of who Jesus is and who he calls us and helps us to be, that is sometimes maybe a bit lacking in society. Now, there are other wonderful things churches do. I mean, I think it's been beautiful seeing food banks, the Trussell Trust and others during this last year being so helpful. I think there's incredible ways the church can serve, maybe in a more organized way, but we're quite a small church. And I think this is something that's true of all churches, that just being able to spend time and know people and invite people into real relationship has been powerful, certainly among our neighbours in the villages where we are.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you, John. Again, I think it's easy to kind of, when you hear that word like being relevant, to think that churches should be doing big projects that, show the whole world that we're relevant. That's got a place, hasn't it? But actually, if you think about it, most Christians I know would say, what drew you to Christ? What drew you to church? It wasn't the programs and projects they were running. It was a person, wasn't it? Almost certainly one person. I can think of 1-2 people that began to turn my heart round from being a pretty atheist 17-year-old to being very intrigued by this community that had a life in it I'd never seen before, and become a Christian. So, if you're a Christian watching this evening, I would just say, pray about it, have confidence that God will use you to demonstrate his relevance, the church's relevance in the way you live your life. Just be a consistent, faithful, forgiving, prayerful, trusting, outward-looking person at work, in your neighborhood, and I think you'll find that God will demonstrate the relevance of his people through that.
Thanks, Richard. I'm going to keep us moving on. There's a few questions that are sort of around the theme of where community within church goes wrong. I'll just pick on one of those, and you may want to draw out things from some of the others, but one of the questions is about why churches have been places of abuse. We'll have all followed things that have gone on in the news over the last few years. Another question based around churches still being places that are people can feel lonely in, and conversations over coffee. Anyone want to kick us off on that? Why does community go wrong still within churches? Thanks, John.
Shall I kick us off? It's really sad. Yes, we are sinners because Christ has shown us his love and drawn us to himself. He is working in us, those of us who are Christians, to change us, to make us more like him. But that work is not complete. So we're not surprised to see sin, even terrible sin, within churches. And some of the abuse scandals that have come out is heartbreaking. And I can't imagine the sadness and the anger of God as he sees his churches that should be places of refuge and sanctuary become places where his children are abused. So it's shocking and it's wrong. And I think as a minister of a church, I want to see that change and work towards that. I think I would also say churches are places where many find refuge. We have people in our church who in different ways have been abused and have found Christ caring for them among brothers and sisters. And you want that to be the case. It doesn't undo the horror and the wrong of the abuse that has gone on and goes on. So in that, at that most sort of extreme end, I think we need to learn, we need to be humble, we need to be honest, we need to change, but we also need to not kind of pull back from seeking to help those who are vulnerable and in need. We just got to make sure we do it properly and well, like Jesus would. So it's a massive topic. I think it's a point of kind of a lot of thought and prayer and repentance for many of us. We're trying to look at a lot of churches. Do we have systems that allow people to abuse power? You know, we trust leaders in churches. We need to be careful how we handle that. You don't want to distrust all authority. That's horrible too. So I think there's a whole raft of difficult things, but yeah, I think it's a good question, and the answers are probably complicated. I think that what Richard said earlier is really helpful. I am hopeful because Christ is in us, and we are not left with merely human resources. We know we are not good enough to do better. You know, we know that sin lurks in us, and the heart above all things is deceitful, the Bible says, and yet Christ is pure and good and warm and kind, and he is the head of the church. He is in charge. He is the Lord. We call ourselves ministers. It's an old word for servant because we're not the boss. That's Jesus, and that is what can give us hope in the church, not because of the church but because of Jesus.
John, thank you. Yeah, Richard and Margaret, anything that either of you want to add there? It's a huge topic.
Yeah, I think the second bit of one of the other questions was about church can be a lonely place. You know, the coffee area after the service, in the days when we had services in person and coffee afterwards. Yeah, I can see that, identify with that. I've often seen people standing quietly in the corner, maybe studying the book table or something, maybe because they want to read the book, but maybe just because no one's talking to them. And I mean, there are two reasons. The question may go one way. They may mean I'm lonely because I'm being told to go and talk to people, but I don't really want to. I suspect it's the other way. This question is someone saying, we're told to go and greet each other over coffee, but everyone talks to everyone else and no one talks to me. And so I was just saying to my wife Carol today, one of the things when we end up leaving this lockdown and have things like coffee after church again, one thing we need to do as a church is to say to each other, don't just go back to doing things like you did before, because we were quite cliquey, weren't we? We were quite good at spotting the people we know and like and going and talking to them. Let's have a rule that I will try and find someone I've not spoken to before, or I don't speak to every week, who's not my friend, because I'll see them another time. So that's a way of saying we are human beings, and as such we are fallible. We like to spend time with people like us, people that we know. It's back to what John was saying about going outside that, being vulnerable, allowing myself to be known by someone else over coffee or whenever, and inviting them to make themselves known to me, even if there's someone I don't naturally think I'm going to relate to. That's Christian discipleship.
Thanks, Richard. There's one question that I'm going to ask each of the panel to answer in a sentence. See if you can limit yourself to one sentence on this. Great question. What do you enjoy most about being a Christian?
I'm going to go in first, give you two a chance to contrive a longer sentence, perhaps. It gets better the longer you go on, because Christ just becomes more and more amazing to you.
Thanks, Richard. John?
I love being loved by God and loving others and getting made into a loving person myself. That was a long sentence.
Margaret, how about you?
I think John's almost said what I was going to say. It is having that relationship with God and knowing that I can come to him at any time and he's always there and he will always welcome me.
Great. Well, thanks so much to the panel. Do get in touch with us. We'd love to carry on some of those conversations. You can email us. You can get in touch through our website. We're aware that with some of those questions, we've only really just absolutely touched the surface, and there's lots more that can be explored. We'd love to talk further with you on that. Whether you watched us live or whether you're watching this a bit later on our YouTube channel, thanks for being with us. Just a couple of things I want to flag up with you. We're in a few weeks' time starting a course that we call the Discover course. It says just what it does. It is just what it says. It's a chance for you to discover more. Thanks, Rob. A chance for you to discover more about the Christian faith, explore life, look more at the person of Jesus. That gets going on the 23rd of February. You can actually, if you've got a phone, you can scan the QR code and that takes you straight to the booking page. It's just 5 weeks. It'll be about an hour and a quarter on Zoom. Margaret, who you've met this evening, will be one of the people leading that, as will Rob. Richard and I will be dipping in and out of it. Very informal, very relaxed. You won't be put on the spot. You won't be asked to pray or sing or do anything you feel uncomfortable with, but a chance to explore more Christian faith and the person of the Lord Jesus. So do get in touch with us. Use the QR code, or if you go to our website, trinitynorwich.org, at the top, if you go to new, then you'll see one of the drop downs is the Discover course there. And we'd love to have you joining us from the 23rd of February. All our services are online at the moment. You're really welcome to come along to any of those. There's a 10 a.m. service and a 6:30 service as well. There's groups for pretty much all ages as well, right from really little ones up to 14s to 18s. There's a student group for those who are that age on a Sunday evening, a 20s and 30s group as well. Again, do get in touch with us. We'd love to tell you more about any of those. Well, thanks for joining us. Hope to see you at either something virtual or we trust at some point when we'll be back in person at something in person soon. Thanks for coming.